So, welcome everyone. It has been a while since we've been together. Um, Welcome to our first meeting of 2023, Seattle Transportation Coalition January membership meeting. I've been having fun wandering around on the SDOT blog the last few meetings and pulling off awesome photos that are being posted there. I should find out which one of my city colleagues is doing that. So here is this really awesome shot of the lower bridge, which we will be talking about with our guests this evening. That was in a recent entry on January 13th.
You're
Tonight's
not sharing your screen, Michael.
Oh, that's well, that's not. Let's try that again. Thank you. So when I say share, I want you to share that window. How's that look now?
The PowerPoint.
All right. So as I said, really great shots from a recent SDOT blog entry of the lower bridge there. Not in the usual state we want to see it in, but you know, we want to make sure it's able to continue opening or continue closing and things like that. So paused looks a little scary, but I find it really neat when we sort of catch it mid-move there. Our agenda this evening is usual call to order, welcome and introductions. We have previous meeting minutes to approve from November. You can check out our YouTube channel. Oh, I forgot to update. We have a much YouTube has handles now if folks are not playing in the social media world all the time. So we actually have a much easier address to remember now to get to our page on YouTube, but I forgot to update that in the slide. Next month or next meeting, we will get underway with an update from Seattle Department of Transportation. Lots of guests that we're familiar with and we haven't chatted with in a while, so we'll welcome them in and wish them Happy New Year. Talking about Spokane Street Lower Bridge. Some data from or how things went with setting up the temporary detour route for bicyclists, as well as they just got some lane closure data stuff looked over for West Marginal Way. We will flash that really long web address up again later, but there it is if you want to attempt to type it all in and find the Spokane Street Swing Bridge Improvement Projects page. We will then have a small discussion about the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal project, specifically a petition that the Fauntleroy Community Association has been circulating around in their neighborhood. We will spend some time talking about old business. Again, I'll come back to this slide later, but reminding folks about our meeting schedule now that we're in our first full year with our bi-monthly meeting schedule. We're going to have a chat with Michelle Bass, Marketing Director from Aegis Living, about moving towards having hybrid meetings. We'll talk a little bit about legislative priorities in 2023. And maybe we can talk a little bit about possibly partnering with West Seattle Chamber of Commerce to do some things. I've put new business there starting at 8:15 and adjourning at 8:30, depending on how our conversations go. That may be considerably shorter. We'll see. If you are joining us for the first time, the purpose of the West Seattle Transportation Coalition is to be a peninsula-wide organization working to address transportation and commuting challenges for the nearly 100,000 people living and working on the West Seattle Peninsula. We accomplish this by securing the support of residents of the peninsula, engaging with elected officials at all levels, partnering with government agencies to achieve the best outcomes for the peninsula, and then engaging with businesses, community organizations, neighborhood groups, individuals, and others, both to educate as well as help collect feedback for the various agencies and government partners and things that we work with. Our goals are affordable and equitable transportation options, particularly in historically underserved neighborhoods, a transportation network that moves people and goods in an environmentally sustainable manner, investments in transportation infrastructure to match Seattle's growth. And usually this section is where we have sort of our key priorities or our legislative issues for the year. We'll be talking about that later. If you were with us at our last meeting in November, we were celebrating a little bit the fact that two of our priorities for quite some time we could remove for this year. We are thrilled that a lot of capacity has now been restored with the reopening of the West Seattle High Bridge. So those will be coming off. I also thought it would be fun as we're looking at sort of end of year wrap up to look back all the way to 2021, where at the end of the year we took off monitoring the Delbridge Way and Rapid Ride H multimodal project, which Sarah Zoras, who's with us tonight, knows how many years and years and years and years that project was an issue here in West Seattle and in the North Delbridge neighborhood in particular. We have some fabulous news though, courtesy of the West Seattle blog that was reporting from a conversation they had with Metro spokesperson Jess Switzer, that we finally have an actual commitment that the conversion from Route 120 to Rapid Ride H is going to be happening with the upcoming service change. And so expecting Saturday, March 18th. Hopefully we will have those what do I want to say, the reader boards turned on and lights going, and we will see an official switch to Rapid Ride H finally. So that will be very exciting. With that, I will move us to introductions. As always, we do not actually slow down and have everybody introduce themselves on camera. We direct you to the chat, which I believe is enabled for everyone. Yes. Turn to the chat window, drop your name, pronouns, access needs, your neighborhood, and question for this meeting is, were you affected, or I guess have you been affected by the lower bridge closure and the problems happening down there? You know, usually we say if you need to be added to the WSTC email list to send a private chat message to board member John Wright. John actually was unable to join us this evening. So I'm going to say, I'm going to direct you at Kate Wells and just ask Kate to grab them. Or if you have any questions, you can send a private chat message to her. And if need be, I can always capture the chat messages at the end of this meeting. With that, we will pause very quickly for the board to approve previous meeting minutes for November. Do I have a motion?
I move that they are correct and that they be approved.
All right, do I have a second?
I second, Larry.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
One, Deb.
All right, so Deb is abstaining. Let's see, you missed the last meeting, right?
Right.
So that makes sense. Thank you very much. With that, I will pause again. I've got lots of fun little news bits to throw in. Lots of stuff has been going on. If you've not been wandering around s.blogs like I have, or wandering on our Facebook page recently, you might have missed this recent news that the City of Seattle is distributing free Orca cards to more than 10,000 Seattle Housing Authority residents. I particularly love this picture because we've got the mayor in it. We've got Seattle Housing Authority Executive Director Rob Brandon in it. And then if you look there in the back up against the window, you will see SDOT Director Greg Spots, who I swear is always smiling and is always tweeting from some corner of the city. So this may be the most engaged and social media savvy director we've had in ages. And so it's kind of fun for those of us keeping an eye on where Greg is at any particular moment. And with that, I will turn over to many of his lovely employees at the Seattle Department of Transportation who are joining us this evening. Again, there's a really long web address if you want to check out Spokane Street Swing Bridge improvement projects. And then I will stop sharing so that Danielle, I believe, will be taking over and sharing some slides on their behalf.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here this evening. I am Megan Shepard with the Seattle Department of Transportation, and I've been the Deputy Director of the West Seattle High Bridge Safety Program for the last few years. And like you, share the joy that the High Bridge is reopened and able to serve the thousands of people who rely on it again. But we did have another bridge closure. That's how we greeted the new year for people in West Seattle and those in the Duwamish Valley. And so we're here tonight to, kind of get into the details of the lower Spokane Street Swing Bridge, which we call the Low Bridge. What happened with the closure and how we're responding to it, as well as sharing the full slate of improvements that are planned for this incredibly unique structure throughout this year. I am joined tonight by several of my longtime teammates, and Danielle Friedman from the Department of Neighborhoods. She's supporting us tonight. And she is our outreach and engagement lead. Sarah Zora is here, and she'll be talking to you later on tonight about the project that we've been working on West Marginal Way to the safety improvements. And she's also joined by Bradley Topol, who's long been engaged in that project. So for the part I'm going to walk through, I have a bunch of slides, but I'm super happy to sort of be interrupted and take questions about the Low Bridge as we go. So the things we're going to cover this evening, I think we can see on the next slide. I'm just going to talk about the recent closure and response, the detours we put in place for people walking and biking, the other program we launched, which was through the Transit Go Rewards app, and then next steps for the bridge. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and Brad at that point. But if we go to the next slide, the Low Bridge, such a unique and fascinating structure. It is pretty much one of a kind. We're not really aware of any others that are like it in the world. It was designed just for its special little place there, crossing the Duwamish, narrow, but it also had to fit underneath the High Bridge. And so, as many of you probably know, I love to use my arms, but it swings open like this. And so there are three really key parts in the Low Bridge that we're just going to talk about today that all come into play. Each side has a lift cylinder that resides within a pier house. The lift cylinder is actually what lifts up the bridge before the turn cylinders push and pull the arms open. So those are really critical parts of the bridge. And then the whole thing is a hydraulic system. There are many, many pumps. There's three on each side, and they pump the fluid that actually does the lifting and the turning. And we'll get into some real photos of those, but these are just some of the parts of that bridge. So on the next slide, we'll talk about what happened. As you all know, we had the horrible ice storm on the 23rd of December, and the power went out to the bridge. And when the power came back on, we had to get the bridge restarted. And in getting it restarted, it actually took several openings to get the bridge open for a vessel that needed to get out. And as you probably know, opening to marine traffic is like the top priority of a bridge in the law of the land. And so this picture here on the top shows you what we found after we got the bridge open, and that was a ton of hydraulic fluid coming out of one of these turn cylinders. Now, we knew that there were issues with the cylinders, and overhauling them was on the list, the long list of things that we were going to tackle this year, but we were going to do it after some other projects. So basically, a known and manageable problem became unmanageable. And there was the risk that if we continued to operate that cylinder in the bridge, that it could cause much more extensive damage inside the pier house to other pieces of equipment and take us a lot longer and cost a lot more money to fix. So that is what happened. Then the first king tide came through, and the water was so high that it did impact some of the electrical lines that go to the bridge's tail locks. So that had to be addressed right off the bat. What you can see in these other photos here down below, there is a slightly artistic photo of, you can see the brown piece there. This is showing some of the damage that was inside the cylinder once we got it out, and we're going to talk about getting it out and into the shop. And then you can see people sort of investigating it here in the other photo. These cylinders are huge. Can we go to the next slide, please, Danielle? 15,000 pounds a piece. And so there's 2 of them on each side. And we're looking at a photo here that shows a slew cylinder in the foreground. And then you can kind of see there's one behind it in the background. So the good news is, before we get into the details, that the operations that were undertaken with the bridge were successful, and the bridge did reopen on January 13th. So it was a 3-week closure, about almost 3 weeks, that the low bridge was closed. And this, of course, happened between Christmas and New Year's. And so there were some good things about that, in that, freight traffic to Terminal 5 was pretty light. At that point, we were past the holidays. But as the first issue we had to acknowledge and deal with is that without the low bridge, we had a significant impact to people walking and biking, because the detour route available to them wasn't a complete detour route, and it took them about 5 or 6 miles out of the way. So that became like an immediate concern for the incident team that was working to address the closure. So the diagnosis was to remove the leaking cylinder and then operate the bridge on one cylinder. The bridge was actually designed to do this, and we actually had to go through a process like this back in, the bridge opened in 91, I think, and a year later, all 4 of these cylinders had failed seals inside, and they had to be replaced, and it had to do with some original calculations about supporting the cylinders. So there were still some folks around who remember doing this back in 92, 93. Thank goodness. So we removed the cylinder, and I'll show you a picture of that operation. We reprogrammed this side of the bridge to operate, to open and close with one cylinder. That's going well. We anticipated that the bridge would open and close more slowly with one cylinder. That's not actually the case. It's opening just about the same as it was before. And it was a multi-day process of taking out the cylinder, testing to see how it was going. In the testing, we found we had some hydraulic system valves that needed to be replaced. We were able to do that. We had to do more testing then, and then we got the bridge open on the 13th. So what we're going to do is refurbish that cylinder, and then we'll bring it back. We'll put it in, we'll remove the next cylinder, we'll refurbish it, put it back, take out the 3rd one, and then we'll do it again for the 4th one. So sort of a rinse and repeat approach to each one of the turn cylinders inside the bridge. So that's the plan. If we go to the next slide, I just want to illustrate this because it was quite the operation. I had the good fortune of being there and being in the presence of a lot of hard-working members and talented problem solvers on SDOT's roadway structures crews who took the cylinder out. Here is a photo showing the cylinder in a custom-built cradle. It also is supported by a custom-built lifting beam being pulled out of the pier house in a circular motion all the way around on the crane rails that are up above. You can see them. And then they had to get the thing out the door and on a flatbed truck. It was a 12-hour operation to get that done. So the diagram on the left just shows you the position of the lift cylinder in relationship to the position of the turn cylinders, as well as the position of the hydraulic pump. We had to replace some check valves. And the hydraulic pumps are important because we're about to do some more work on them. Next slide, please. Before we talk about what comes next in the low bridge specifically, I wanted to talk about the bicycle detour. For those of you who have been working with us for a very, very long time, you know that we move like lightning for us to design and put in place a temporary PBL in 2 locations. One was along West Marginal Way, where we have been working for about 2.5, 3 years now on safety improvements, including a PBL on that stretch. We will talk more about that in a bit. And then First Avenue South. The team looked quickly at a lot of options, and they picked First Avenue for a few reasons. One, it was going to be the most direct route to get people back onto the East Marginal Way location where folks end up when they come off the low bridge normally. The pavement was in the best condition. It had the fewest railroad crossings. So there were a few factors like that the team was taking into account. And they put that in place on January 4th and 5th. About 1,700 traffic cones were out there. You can see in the photo on the left a smattering of what that looked like. Our sign shop was cranking out signs. There was one day where they made 72. And then as the cones and the signs were put out there, members of our engineering team were on site, sort of supervising, making real-time changes. While the temporary PBL was out on First Avenue, our maintenance and operation crews visited it 3 times a day to put the cones and the signs back in place. We met with a lot of you and other stakeholders. We got real-time feedback. The area, as you came off the First Avenue South Bridge, continued to need some special attention. And the feedback we heard from people who were biking it was very helpful in adding signs, adding cones, and letting people know where they were and like how to stay on the bike detour. It underscored the need for redundancy during closures of the low bridge, as well as the need for a facility through that portion of SODO. As you probably know, there is a project, the Georgetown to downtown, that is in design right now. In addition to getting feedback from people who were biking, we also met quite a bit with businesses that were on First Avenue. And to talk about their loading operations, their employee access, and they were really helpful as well in giving us real-time feedback on the temporary PBL. I think I saw your hand go up, Deb. Nope, no question. Okay, so we took out the First Avenue South one on January 14th, the day after we reopened the bridge, the West Marginal Way, temporary PBL. The other thing we did, if we can go to the next slide, Danielle, was worked in partnership with King County Metro to get free transit tickets out there for people crossing the Duwamish on the water taxi or on buses. We were able to do this through Seattle Transit Measure Funds, and we were able to promote it through the Transit Go Rewards app. As many of you know, that's an app we widely promoted in West Seattle and the Duwamish Valley through the Flip Your Trip West Seattle program that was active while the High Bridge was closed. So that program also ended on the 13th when the low bridge reopened, and 2,100 users took part, and they redeemed over 1,400. So people were able to take advantage of that during that second half of the low bridge closure. So we learned a lot about speed and moving quickly. And these are learnings we can take with us to future situations. Michael, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I wonder, I just had a curious question looking at the photo there. Any sense from the county, like, did we see more bicycles taking the water taxi as a result of this program and people taking advantage of the rewards, or we just don't have that data?
I don't have that data yet. I know we're trying to pull it all together, and I'll turn to Sarah and Danielle and see if you've heard any feedback like that from King County Metro.
Not at this time, Michael, but we can definitely look into that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Observation.
Okay, so let's turn our attention back to the low bridge and what comes next. Okay, I mentioned the hydraulic pump systems. The photograph on this slide shows the pump arrays. There is 3 of them in a row. They're actually several parts of different pumps and motors, all hooked together, pushing the hydraulic fluid through the bridge system. So one of the projects, we started several projects on the low bridge last year, and one of them was a similar like rinse and repeat on these pumps take them out, refurbish them, we put them back in. So the two here you're looking at were recently refurbished and they just went back in the fall. I think that was October. And we've got two more that are about to come in over the weekend of February 11th through the 14th. I like to think of them as the pumping heart of the low bridge, and it's going to get a new heart for Valentine's Day. But the engineers don't always think that's as cute as I do. So we've got a list of improvements for the low bridge that have been underway for last year, and there's a lot more of them coming this year. Some of them we've been talking about with you quite a bit, such as the communications and controls project, talk about those in a second. And then there are others like these pump arrays, hydraulic cylinder. Now we're adding the turn cylinders to the work. So what it summarizes to is that there will be more closures of the low bridge this year. Some of them will affect people traveling on the water, and some of them will affect the people traveling on the land. And now that we've added the turn cylinder schedule, now that we've accelerated that in our 2023 work plan, we're still working to sort of like revise our sense of what closures will happen when, what work can we consolidate and do at the same time. But we do anticipate several more closures of the low bridge, and we'll be working on all of you. Jeremy. Jeremy, I see your hand and I see an empty screen.
Yeah, camera crashed.
Okay.
So you said that the turn cylinders, they're being replaced one at a time, but they're paired 2 and 2. So
Yeah.
couldn't we do 2 at a time and do fewer closures?
That is an excellent question. I don't have an answer to it yet. I know that each cylinder could be different when this is what they say, they crack it open. So when they crack it open, they might find that each one has different needs. And there is, of course, a risk of operating the bridge on one cylinder, like so far so good on this side. But I'm sure that I know they are looking for efficiencies as they revise that schedule. So that's a good question, and I will ask it of the engineering team.
Fair enough. Thank you.
So the next slide is just where we're going to kind of cover a little bit what's coming up. I do want to go back and mention that we did strengthen the bridge completed that in October of 2022. That was Kramer, who also did the work on the high bridge. They added carbon fiber wrapping and epoxy crack injection, which are their terms that you have all heard many times, to the low bridge. So that was the part of the strengthening that happened. We did some new pumps last fall as well. We're going to do more new pumps in February. I mentioned the lift cylinders. We have a similar effort where we need 2 and we have 3. So we refurbish one while the other 2 are working, and then we swap it in, take one out, refurbish it. So we've got a newly refurbished one that's coming in. That'll be this spring sometime. And then the controls and communications of this bridge are original. And you can imagine all of the technology advances we have had since the early 1990s. So we are really looking forward to being able to put a new communications line that will go underneath the Duwamish. Right now, those lines run up and around the high bridge, and a whole new control system. So those projects are in the works as well for this year. And then we will add the sluice cylinders and lots of other maintenance and replacement items, as well as we continue to focus on keeping this bridge, preserved and maintained. I see a note in the chat about what technology advances. One of the computers that can be used to reprogram the bridge is a Toshiba 3200. And if you haven't seen one of those lately, they are very heavy and difficult to find them nowadays. And that is how the bridge gets reprogrammed. That's one of the ways that the bridge can be reprogrammed. So that's what's up. That's what's coming. And keeping you and other users of the lower bridge up to date is a pretty high priority for us this year. So we'll be pushing out a lot of communications as we approach each one of these closures so that people can plan and prepare for them. But given the number of closures we're anticipating, that does turn our attention towards the needs of people who are walking and biking over that low bridge and continuing to have a safe place for them to do so while those closures are underway. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Zora to talk about the projects on West Marginal Way that we've been working on.
Thanks, Megan. Brad is actually going to provide this presentation today, and then I will be around for any questions as needed. So Brad, I will pass it to you, my friend.
Hey y'all, Brad Topol, work for SDOT, usually him, and I work specifically within the Vision Zero Safety team. I've been here before, but for any of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, glad to be here. So looking back on the background of the West Marginal Way protected bike lane project, we are adding a 0.4 mile long, or about a half mile long of protected bike lane to close the gap between the trail segment just south of Idaho Street and the West Seattle Bridge Trail connection there. So additionally, we've been working with all of the industrial businesses, specifically the ones in the trail section on the southern 2.5 miles of the corridor to look at driveway access and looking at doing things like clearing vegetation, and then we'll have a slide that talks about a few other things, but making sure that we're, if we're expecting an increase in ridership because we're creating a safer and more comfortable connection, that we're continuing to do other treatments that make sure everyone's visible and that people can see each other, things like that. Next slide, please. Initially, the request was for me to come talk about our pilot project, which happened at the end of October and the beginning of November. We did collect some data recently during all this wonderful stuff that Megan was just talking about, but we haven't had a chance to fully analyze it yet. But we haven't really expected to see, there shouldn't have really been any drastic changes. The traffic pattern should be very similar to when the pilot was in place. And since then, so what did we look at? We were looking at driver speeds along the corridor. We were looking at driver volumes when we closed that southbound lane during the pilot time. And additionally, we've done additional driveway counts along the whole corridor, especially with along some of those industrial businesses with really heavy freight traffic along the trail section to the south, and made sure that we're looking at all that. So next slide, please. So what did we find when we looked at specifically our speed data? This is in the southbound section, we looked at 3 different segments of roadway. So we looked at Dakota Street, or the area around Dakota Street, which is kind of right by the, there's a Parks and Recreation facility out there. That was kind of where we took that data. Then we looked as well as at Alaska Street, so where there was an existing single lane condition there, southbound. And then we looked at Front Street at the south end of the corridor, where we have an existing 2-lane southbound section. So our before and after at Dakota, that was the only thing that switched. So before the pilot, we had 2 lanes southbound, then we narrowed it to 1. So it's the configuration you see today with the cones and barrels out there. And then Alaska maintained being a single lane, and Front Street maintained being 2 lanes. What we saw is a 12% decrease in speed, which was what we want to see. We want to see that behavior change. It came more in line with the Alaska Street speeds, where again, there's a single lane condition there. And from a Vision Zero standpoint and a safety standpoint, that's what we want. We want to see slower speeds. We want to see speeds that are more in line with the speed limit. They're still not as low as we'd like them to be, but they are an improvement. And we know that things like a 5 or 10% change in speeds can have a drastic decrease in collisions, a 20 to 25% decrease in total collisions. So we saw that as a big benefit. Next slide, please. Looking at what do the actual driver volumes do? Driver volumes dropped 60% overnight. I mean, that's these two, we have September bridge closed and September bridge open. Those are literally like days apart. Those are the exact, I rounded them, but those are basically almost exact numbers from like Friday and then Monday between when the high bridge opened. This is in line with counts that we have from pre-COVID, from the pre-high bridge closure. We were seeing summer volumes around 15,000 vehicles a day back in 2019. So this matches what we saw right after the bridge opened. And then again, during the pilot, we saw similar volumes. I think volumes drop a little bit in the winter just because people aren't doing as much during the day, maybe, or people aren't going out and doing other things. But we would expect that when we look at this new data, we would see almost this very similar thing, something between 12 and 15,000. So that's right, exactly where we were expecting the drop back down to after the high bridge opened. So what are we continuing to do in addition to the Protected Bike Lane project? We have been, like I said, we've been working with some of the other freight stakeholders out there on the south end. We're looking at continuing to add additional markings. We're looking at clearing any vegetation that may be obscuring people biking or from people driving. Encouraging people to be slow. And additionally, we were looking at adding things like vegetated median islands on West Marginal. So in that center two-way turn lane, areas where we're not going to have any real conflicts with too many driveways, we're looking to add some kind of what we might call visual friction, right? So if we put stuff, if we create median space and maybe put some low-level plantings in there, that doesn't actually prevent anybody from traveling down the road. It doesn't reduce lanes, but it does kind of make the space feel a little tighter and make it feel narrower, even though the lane sizes won't change. And we're hoping that that may continue to further reduce speeds over time. Additionally, while we are expecting an increase in ridership out here, we've been doing some extra little dives into collisions and things like that. We've only had a single driveway collision in like the last decade on this trail. So the sight lines are really good out here. Trucks, people who are driving trucks and people who are riding bicycles, everyone can see each other from a pretty far distance. So we're not expecting really any increase in conflicts with an increase in ridership. You can go ahead. So what are our big takeaways from the impacts of the protected bike lane? Basically, what our traffic modeling is showing from before the high bridge opened is continuing to kind of match what we're seeing out there today in the field. We do have some travel time indicators out there, things that track travel time in real time, and we're seeing basically like almost no change in the southbound direction. From even like when the high bridge was closed, it was like really negligible changes. And that's because even before the high bridge was closed or before it opened, we were seeing people travel through this area, above the speed limit without delay. So that hasn't changed. People are still traveling above the speed limit without delay. Our computer modeling showed like an average delay of maybe 2 more seconds when we closed that single lane. And that's just because at some of those traffic lights, people might not get that extra jump start with 2 lanes that you do with a single lane, but a lot of those signals aren't cycling too terribly often anyway. So there's most of the hour, there's a green light at those signals anyway. So it's really negligible impacts from kind of very on the edge of what we can even measure. So that's good. We're not really seeing those impacts. And then what our pilot data showed was that even though we're not really affecting those travel times, we are seeing that speed limit reduction drop, or that those speeds go down, which for us is a big important thing when it comes to safety. Next steps, we've still been committed to a 2023 install, but we're still continuing to work with our freight stakeholders and community partners like you all here to just kind of continue to brief everyone on the data and all the trends that we're seeing. Cool. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, Brad. I'm just curious, is the plan to go to do the 2-way bike lane to the first light or to the one by the Duwamish Longhouse?
Just the first light. So basically the first light is what it doesn't have an actual cross street, but we sometimes refer to as Idaho Street because it's like a half block to the north. But that existing trail crossing where you see people coming up the trail on the east side and then transitioning over to the west side, that's where we'll see people biking continue to transition over. And then the bike lane will be just north of that existing signal.
And is there a plan to work with the railroad to try to get that trail crossing on the railroad so it's not all torn up and the asphalt is really deformed there?
Yeah, we work with BNSF. They did replace the one to the south,
I
which
saw
was
that.
great.
Yeah.
Wasn't us. They just did it. And we're like, oh, awesome. I think maybe Sarah has more info than me. We do meet with them monthly, and it's something that we've raised. But sometimes they can be just like molasses slow when it comes to some of these things. But I know I write it out there, so I know exactly what you're saying. We're going to continue to work with them. Tracy has a question in the chat about ped and bike count info. We've done several counts during the closure or when the high bridge was closed. And we were seeing about, depending on seasonality and weather, we were seeing about 100 to 200 people using the trail every day. Most of it was people biking, and then there was about maybe 20 to 30 people walking a day. And most of that data was collected kind of in this protected bike lane section, but we did do some down on the south end too. And we saw similar numbers as we would expect to, because there's no way to really leave this corridor midway. Don, I think you were next, and then we'll move on to Kate.
Thanks. And I really appreciate the quick action on West Marginal Way, and it's a great opportunity to try out things and see how driveways work for the businesses there and the interactions with bikes. I would also like to note that doing the protected bike lane is also a really great benefit to the crossing and the things that the Duwamish tribe has been trying to achieve for the last 10 years, 11 years now, to get safe pedestrian crossing there. And the signal, the temporary signal and crosswalk that are in place really depend on having that single lane up to that point to avoid having drivers aggressively stay in the right lane and not honor the striping that's on the street, because a lot of the problems there are really from very aggressive drivers on a curve with poor sight lines. So I think it's worth mentioning in your presentations to the public that this is not just benefiting a few bike riders and people walking, but it's also benefiting the Longhouse and Cultural Center. And I really appreciate the map, the graphic map now that you're using that shows the whole length from Spokane Street to Highland Parkway, because it shows how short this protected bike lane is as a part of that length. So, and that's something that I think a lot of people in the community didn't really understand, that they thought the whole street was getting narrowed down and was going to be a choke point. But
yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We work with the Longhouse. We meet with them regularly. I met with them today to talk about some other work, and that definitely, like the speeds has definitely been one of their biggest concerns. We agree with that. So
I volunteer there as a crossing guard for some of their events, and it used to be incredibly scary, and now it is still a little bit scary, but much less so with the light there.
Yeah, we'll be coming through and making some more improvements, hopefully in the fall, around that signal again, just to kind of formalize things. We did our interim or our temporary treatment there because we couldn't really touch the railroad, but if we can, we're working with BNSF again. They have been so slow. It's just really frustrating, but we'll be coming back at some point once we get their approval to kind of expand some pieces there and kind of basically formalize it and organize it just a little better than it is today. Additionally, we'll be coming through and taking that interim asphalt sidewalk that we built a few years ago and making it a formal concrete sidewalk to give them better access. And that'll also just help us formalize and organize the area a little bit better and make things look nicer. So
Yes.
I think we have, thank you, Don. I think we had Kate and then Larry.
Okay. So I've got a couple questions about the driveway markings. Is anything being done for the truck drivers, like stop bars or green paint across the driveways, that sort of thing? And then my other question is, I see that the bikes have signs that say slow and the little rumble strip things. Who has the right of way in that situation?
In that situation, you treat it like you would treat it, well, like trail would act like either a sidewalk or a roadway, right? So anyone approaching from a driveway or like a side street condition should be yielding to people biking. I know that we were looking at green. Sarah, do you have any? I'm not sure. I haven't been as completely tuned into those conversations as I was previously.
Yeah.
So
We have been mainly more focused on utilizing what's existing out there. So we're utilizing the existing rumble strips that are on the trail already on the approaches to the driveways. And some of our driveway entrances will have some signage as well for drivers crossing across just to remind them that you're on a trail, so look both ways. We're trying also the vegetation that Brad was talking about. We've done some trimming, on the like trail pathway, but also some trimming higher above, so we can just make sure sight lines are good for all users of that trail. We're just trying to make sure and bring awareness that people need to slow down no matter what kind of mode you're in. And really make sure if that connection is built, we could have a lot of newer riders coming in. So we really want to make sure everyone feels safe and in their right spots to make sure they can pay attention to everything.
Okay, thank you.
We will have green paint though across the driveways with the protected bike lane, of course, like our typical protected bike lane. A lot of our trails, we don't do necessarily green across driveways. So it's just something that we're trying to also be consistent with our other trail driveway crossings.
I should say, it's great to hear that there's only been one crash in the driveways there over 10 years. And I've generally had pretty good experiences with the truck drivers. They're very aware. So
yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, and that crash was it was down by like the bagel shop, and so it was actually like a passenger vehicle. It wasn't even a freight or a large vehicle. It was just like a passenger vehicle. I can't tell from the report if the person was like at the bagel shop or the Subway or something. But Don, can we let Larry go, and then I'm happy to give you some time. I want to make sure we're.
Hi, yeah, Larry Weimer. I'm on the board. I'm also a licensed traffic engineer. I've expressed this concern before. I completely understand the situation while the bridge was closed, but the intersection of Highland Park and Marginal Way, I understand that you doubled up the northbound left turns from Marginal onto westbound Highland Park. So I've been concerned ever since. I understood it was fine when we had the detour. But we still have those double lefts, and I'm very concerned because the left lane of that double left, as it approaches the west side of that intersection, it encroaches right at the point where anybody making an eastbound to southbound right turn would have a head-on crash with anybody in that left lane turning left. And it's been a serious concern of mine. I'm surprised it hasn't happened. I know there's a no right turn on red sign there, but if some jerk just decides, oh, I'm going to do it, and they're not paying attention, there's a potential for a serious crash there. I don't know if that's been looked at. I don't know if it's still warranted to have that double left turn. I don't know if it's been looked at.
You're talking about the northbound left?
The northbound to westbound left, yeah. There's a double left, and the left turn of that northbound to westbound left, as soon as they're getting close to the eastbound leg, they're right there at the front bumper of somebody that would be making a right turn on red. And again, there's a sign saying no right turn on red, but if somebody did, crash. So it's always concerning. Every time I see that, it just freaks me out.
Yeah, and there were a lot of anecdotal reports of that during the bridge closure.
Okay. Yeah, we can bring these comments back to our engineering team. Originally, we had said we weren't going to be making any other modifications to that intersection, but we definitely want to hear these kind of comments, and we'll take another look at what the design looks like and if we're seeing any issues like you're seeing, Larry. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I brought it up with Heather last time and she kind of pushed it off. And so
Okay.
in your
We'll have our
opinion, it was
engineers
safe,
look
but
for sure.
I still
Yeah.
want to keep bringing it up because it is a concern of mine.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Don, sorry for cutting you off earlier.
That's okay. I just wanted to also mention that area by the Subway shop and the little coffee shop at, I think it's Front Street. That on the biking northbound on the Duwamish Trail, I think that's really the only really bad spot for crossing traffic, that people are coming around the corner at Highland Park, and there may be something on navigation apps or something that causes people to turn into that drive thinking they're supposed to be going in there when they're really not. But it's the only area where I often have close calls with, and there's not much time to see a driver coming. So I'm just wondering if maybe that intersection could be narrowed down and reorganized so that it looks more like the drive that it actually is into the wherever it is, cold storage place, and
yeah,
less of a great big wide free for all.
Yeah, we are very aware of that, and we are actually looking at that to see what options are available to us. So we are potentially looking at a narrowing. We're looking at maybe is there a way, like, can we rebuild it so that it looks more like a driveway and it doesn't look like a free, like that you should be, because in a driveway scenario, right, truck drivers are they're gonna really slow down. This one, are there ways that we can make it feel more that way and make it feel like you should be slowing down more? So we actually are looking at that. We just haven't completely settled on what exactly we're going to do, but we went out there with our city traffic engineer, and he was like, if there's anywhere we need to concentrate, it should be in this space for people biking. And so we just haven't fully analyzed everything yet and gotten down to what exactly the treatment will be there, but we're definitely want to do something.
Great, thanks.
Are there any other questions? The gas station, yeah. Yeah, Kathy, you got your hand up?
Just one thing, I don't know, you may have shown it in your design, I couldn't understand, that lane reduction is going to continue all the way from the West Seattle Bridge down to the Duwamish Longhouse, right?
Yep.
Even though there's no bike lane in there.
Yeah, we worked with, there's only a single business out there south of the proposed bike lane between between those two signals. There's only one business, and we worked with them. We were going to potentially include a parking lane, but the businesses out there are worried about encampments. There is one right now up on Marginal Place, and they see that and they're worried about crime and things like that. And so we are just going to stripe out that it's a very short segment. It's like 0.1 miles, or it's like a block or something, it works out to like a block face or something like that. And we don't want to open it back up to two lanes of traffic right before the Longhouse, because you don't even have enough space to pop out and then merge back in. It wasn't, from an engineering perspective, it doesn't make any sense. So we're just going to maintain a single lane the whole way. So
yeah, and then Larry again, traffic engineer. Yeah, I know I've looked at that and discussed it a lot, and I think it's perfectly fine with that single lane leading up to the Longhouse. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you're already restricted once you go under that high bridge if you're heading southbound. So once you've already had that lane reduction, then everyone's can just, other than maybe a few driveway interactions of people popping in and out, everyone's just kind of cruising, at speed at that point. So it's so we're going to continue to keep it a single lane the whole way. I think with some of this sidewalk work, we may look at opportunities to formalize south of the bike lane. Are there other ways we can do concrete bump outs into the road where, again, it adds that visual narrowing effect and puts that curb a little farther out in the road, so that encourages people to drive slower, especially on the approach to the Longhouse. Oh, let's see. Don, you had a comment. West Seattle Bridge connection supported to end the PBL at the existing trail crossing light and supported the traffic clusters. Oh, got it. Anything else?
And it's spelled there wrong.
I'm curious, is there a
Well, there-
timeline or for say the bike trail or the bike lanes? Or are we waiting to do the whole West Marginal package as one?
We're thinking about the ability to be able to do it in phases. So like the in-street protected bike lane and then the trail. You know, the trail, we definitely need better weather because it's a lot of paint, you know. We still do have the month of February to, you know, meet with the bike board about this, share the data, and we're going to the freight board, bike board beginning of the month, freight board at the end of the month, and then just making sure that we can have everyone in alignment and make sure our crews can get scheduled for install. So it might still be a little bit of time away, but we're definitely spending this next month of February doing sharing this data collection and tying up all of our engagement on this project.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for having us. It's good to see you all.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Sarah.
We always love to have you all out here. So
Anytime.
Thank you so much.
all right.
Bye, Megan.
Bye.
With that, I will get us back into our agenda. We're a little behind, but I think we'll catch that up there. Let's have a quick discussion here about the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Trestle and span replacement project, which is something we've been keeping an eye on for a while. You can, if you need to check out more, feel free to jot down that. Why can I not talk tonight? Feel free to jot down that web address, and it will be available afterwards to pause the video or grab out of the agenda up on YouTube. And I will forward here. I know I saw Vicky come in, who may have some things to say, but part of what prompted this is for folks who aren't over in that corner of the peninsula, the Fauntleroy Community Association has been pushing for folks to sign a petition. And this is these are screen clips out of their recent December newsletter. So their official position by the board on the terminal upgrade, as they put here, is yes to efficiency, yes to safety, and no to expansion. Efficient pre-ticketing and automated toll collection would fill the dock with cars ready to board at peak times. Efficient transit connections would reduce the number of cars. Both would improve customer service. They support strengthening the dock for seismic stability and elevating it for sea level rise. But expanding the terminal by enlarging the dock or adding a second slip, they believe would degrade nearshore habitat by increasing overwater coverage, and that neither would get any more passengers to their destinations faster. They also had a piece by their president, Mike Day, with more details there. Again, they have a petition that they circulated, and to date, so this was sometime in December, they said they had over 600 signatures and that they were continuing to collect more. And if you look down there in the bottom right, you can email Mike at msdey50@aol.com. So presumably if you want to know more or you're interested in signing that petition, feel free. Again, I think Vicky is here if she wants to unmute and say anything, or if anybody else wants to raise their hand and say anything. Mostly I wanted to bring up that this petition was circulating around if people was interested. We have been sort of invited to endorse that position if we wanted to. I think based on past precedent, this may this is kind of in the middle, I think, of where we've been in the past. I think this is bigger than a small neighborhood project that we tend not to get involved in. I mean, we already have a board member and previous board members who are involved in keeping an eye on this project. But I don't know if it's big enough and if it's an issue we want to weigh in on. So this is something I thought we'd take a few minutes just to talk about and discuss. And Vicky, I think you're waving your hand, so take it away.
Well, I'm not going to share what my position is on this simply because I sat on the community advisory board, but I would share two things. There was a significant amount of discussion about the expansion. One of the leading restrictions, and this is coming from the Ferry people themselves, is they have a very limited budget for this project. It's already been allocated, and they do not anticipate any additional funds coming for any significant changes to the footprint. So that's one thing that's out there. But secondly, Mike Day noted in his letter that, I don't know if you distributed to the board or not, but that the city did an extensive analysis of the ferry traffic coming in this triangle route through West Seattle and determined that it really couldn't continue to grow. There are geographical limitations that just cannot be overcome. And it doesn't seem efficient for moving people from Southworth and Vashon to go 8 miles to get to the West Seattle Bridge, or a similar drive time to go south. And they're exploring ways to look at how they can manage this traffic flow better, rather than just simply expanding the dock and trying to accommodate more cars, because it becomes a bottleneck once it hits West Seattle. So those are very long-term items that they're going to be looking at. So it appears to the Fauntleroy Community Association that they should replace the dock, do what the original project called for, you know, to raise it up and refurbish it the way it needs to. And they feel that the ticketing prospects of changing that would move a lot more traffic more easily, because they get backed up too much on Fauntleroy. So I just wanted to share that if anybody had any questions about some of the conversations that's come up already.
Oh, Jeremy raised his hand. Take it away, Jeremy.
So my recollection of when the Washington State ferries were here is the intent behind the expansion is just so that they have an entire ferry's worth of cars past all the traffic lights. I don't remember how many get spilled back onto the road right now. And I also don't remember if they gave data on if the traffic lights are ever a cause of, like, that they're waiting for a light to turn green so that they can get a couple more cars on the ferry before it departs. But yeah, my recollection is they were just trying to get it so that the pier matched the boat.
Well, what the bottleneck is, though, is that people have to stop and pay. Now, the normal commuter, the people that commute for work, typically buy their passes, so they're able to move through there fairly quickly. But there's a significant number of people that have to stop at the toll booth there to pay to get on. So it stops the flow too much. And that's why they are looking at how can they get people to, in a sense, be prepaid so that they can go right onto the dock rather than being stuck at the toll booth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who lives in the area, do you know, does it ever seem like wait, is there even a light there, or is it just a three-way
No,
stop?
there's no light there. No.
Okay. In my head, it was a stoplight that was stopping people from turning right into the ferries.
It's a very narrow roadway there, which can be expanded, but boats are taking off not full because people are still waiting to pay. And that's been acknowledged. And the Ferry people had some really good ideas, including the local community people, about how they might improve that. And they feel like if they could get that working better, then maybe they can deal with the traffic backup. But also it should be noted that there's really only one time a day that we run into this traffic backup, because most of the time it's the commuter traffic that's doing it. And the rest of the day, it's fine. People move in and out just without a problem.
Fair enough. That's my question. Larry?
Larry, you got your hand up?
Trying to unmute. Hello. Yeah, I wanted to see if maybe it's possible for us to kind of discuss this for next month, for our board meeting next month, and maybe we could vote on this, see if we want to take an official position on this.
Sure.
Can I jump in here just quickly? Mike Day will be back in country. He was hoping to be on this call. He's in Uganda. So I'm sure he would be happy to answer any questions for the board if you want to postpone till next month.
Sounds good. Kate?
Does anybody know if Ferries pays any money to the city for using the right of way, or if there's an arrangement of some sort? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm sure there is some kind of arrangement like that, Kate. And actually I learned that Washington State, King County, and the city all have have a relationship to that piece of property. So I'm not sure what the ins and outs are, but yes, I'm quite sure they have some connection there.
Yeah, since they do take up the whole lane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know offhand if they're what the city may be getting from them. I do know that one way the city benefits, of course, is that the whole length of Fauntleroy there, approaching up to the ferry dock, is considered a state route for legal purposes, because ferries are considered part of the highway system.
So Fauntleroy is part of that?
Yes, and so I think they are able to,
Okay.
I believe, someone would have to confirm for sure. I'm not speaking on behalf of the city in any capacity right now, but I believe there are extra funds that they can sort of sometimes access from both state and through federal grants that go to like PSRC and things like that, that come through for highway stuff and things that we wouldn't normally be able to access for most city stuff.
Interesting.
So that is a help there. Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. We can push this off and talk more later as a board. I mean, for me, I'm curious to hear from Mike a little bit more on exactly like how we think traffic flow. I mean, I've certainly have long been on record as wanting to get rid of that entire ferry terminal, and I frankly think it's a malfeasance, if you will, that when we planned a brand new passenger ferry terminal and plans for a complete rebuild and upgrade of Coleman Dock, that no one seemed to think it was worth seriously considering moving this ferry over into downtown in some way. But for me, I always understood a big complaint of Fauntleroy to be that traffic lining up there on the street. And so if Fauntleroy wants to get rid of that traffic, I don't see how we don't support an expanded dock. Or if Fauntleroy doesn't want an expanded dock, then I'm not sure I want to hear any more from the neighborhood down the road complaining about traffic problems there. Because that seems to me like you got to have one or the other. You can't, have your cake and eat it too. But I'd love to hear more from Mike about exactly what they've been discussing and how they've come to this position. So, Vicky, do you want to just let Mike know? And then when I've got a board link and things, I can send it to him at his email address.
I'm more than happy to do that, Michael.
All right.
because I know he's eager to engage the transportation board on this issue. So, yeah.
All right. Anybody have any other questions or anything, or shall I move on? I know we have our other guest with us. All right, hearing nothing, or what's in the chat there that I missed anything? Comment there from Kathy, make it a passenger and bike ferry with transit connections at both ends. Problem solved. All right, I will keep us moving forward here then. Again, what we have remaining on the agenda is mostly old business, unless folks have some significant new business to propose. I want to remind everyone, 2023, it's our first full year with our bi-monthly meeting schedule, which means our next meetings will be in March, May, July, September, and November. And as we look at our meetings for the year, we've been talking for a while about hybrid meetings, and one of the places we've been looking at is Aegis Living, Aegis or Aegis Living, and we have Michelle Bass, who's the marketing director here with Aegis Living with West Seattle.
Yeah,
and
good
so
evening, everybody.
welcome.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, guys. Yeah, it's pronounced Aegis. It means to shield and to protect. It's what we do for our residents.
So I think in full disclosure, I think everybody knows I work at Aegis, and Michelle and I have been talking about this a little bit, and it sounds pretty interesting. So I invited her here tonight to tell us a little bit more. I know Deb personally has some experience because Deb came and joined me once to give a little presentation to our residents. So she has some familiarity with this as well. So I look forward to hearing Deb's thoughts on this once Michelle gives us a little bit more information.
So yeah, we have a full theater that sits around 20 to 24 people. We have a big screen that I actually just bought a table for Larry. And so it's a corner table with outlets in it. And then you can just put Zoom and you'll be streamed to the big screen in the theater, and it has surround sound. So great sound, great video quality. You guys would just park in the parking garage, go straight into the theater, no problem. I'm more than happy to put tea and cookies in there for you, but it's really easy to do, to have a hybrid meeting there, and it's totally complimentary of Aegis as well.
And just adding on to that, normally we have a door that you have to enter a code in to open it up through the day, but Michelle said we would just kind of keep that open through this meeting so people can just pull into the garage and park. Yep.
And lots of parking spots too.
We certainly appreciate the very generous welcome and offer. We're not looking for a huge amount. I think some of us would like to be face-to-face, maybe occasionally get some guests actually in face-to-face, but I think we still anticipate that it's very convenient for folks to be able to participate virtually, and it allows us to record. So I think we're definitely looking at sort of a lot of potentially people being online still and not trying to squeeze 30 or 40 people into a room. So I think that's fabulous. I'm assuming Wi-Fi is good.
It's great, yes.
And it'd be lovely, it might be hopefully a lovely opportunity to welcome some of your residents to come in and share some of their experiences occasionally with how bus service is up into Admiral, or some of their other needs.
That's Larry, they have a lot of opinions.
On the bus.
Yeah.
But we've heard of buses.
But no, it's totally accessible. It's easy to do. You won't even go through the main building. You'll just go straight into the Admiral's room, into the theater. There's restrooms, waters, fountains, things of that sort. So
and that it's called the lower level, and essentially it's not off limits, but generally residents, especially at night, are not going down there.
Okay. Yeah,
it's a pretty separate area.
Very private.
How is access for people who are not driving? Because some of us live nearby and would walk or bike. And is there any kind of bike parking in the garage or nearby?
Oh, yeah. Yep, there's bike racks in the garage at the end, but feel free to pull into a parking spot.
Bus stop is right in front.
Is the theater door on Wait or Admiral?
Wait.
Okay. That's why it's at the lower level, I guess.
That's right. We went underground.
So we'd probably want to give that kind of instructions for people arriving, either by car, by foot or whatever.
And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. If any of you guys want to come and check it out, just coordinate with me or coordinate with Michelle. You can come and just check in as a visitor, and I'll be glad to take you down. I work there Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursdays, and then I actually take the theater over in the afternoon on Monday afternoon and have Larry's Monday movie matinee. So, but yeah, if anybody wants to come and check it out, just coordinate with me, and happy to take you down and show it to you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, anytime. I really appreciate Larry. We respect him, and anything for Larry and your board, and to make things easier for you guys. Okay.
That's great. I mean, I think, I think we're looking for some community locations, around West Seattle for how do we all move forward into this hybrid future here.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, it's totally different.
Anything we
it's
might
a
be
new
able
world
to do to help you with raising some money and, upgrading any of the tech or whatever, we'd certainly want to, be a part of that as well. So thank you very much for this offer.
You're welcome. And you guys being in the community is great enough for us. We're all word of mouth. We love just sharing what we do.
All right. Any
Thanks,
other questions
Michelle.
for anyone,
Appreciate
or shall we let Michelle get back to, I don't know if you're working right now or you're at home. Hopefully you're at home and you can relax.
I know. I'm going to go hang some clothes on the elliptical.
Oh, all righty.
Thank you guys for having me, and have a wonderful night together.
All right. You too.
Thanks,
Thank you
Michelle.
so much.
Bye, Larry.
All right. Well, how exciting. We'll start making plans then, Larry, for our March meeting to be hybrid.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get some cool West Seattle guests to actually be there in person. Oh, and I see Dub's
You have a reason
back.
for now. It's walking distance for him.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Let's get Dow and let's grill him about planning for buses, which should be along here in an upcoming slide. So we'll talk here in a moment about legislative priorities for 2023. I put on here partnering with West Seattle Chamber of Commerce on bus service. I haven't had any recent conversations again with them, but the last time I was there with their Government Affairs Committee, this was one of the things we thought might be a good thing to partner on. Looking ahead, if we have some time, new business, as we're looking for things to do in between meetings, I wanted to toss out the idea there as people are beginning to declare for District 1 City Council seat. If we want to plan a forum or reach out to some of our partner organizations about being involved in, presumably there will be City Council candidate forums happening in May and June. And so we may have transportation priorities that we want to get out there. Yes.
I just want to say, I know that the West Seattle blog is going to be doing a candidate forum. Oh, see, Tracy just said they are having one in May. And members of D1CN District 1 Community Network will be able to ask questions at that West Seattle blog candidate forum. And so if any of the WSTC members are actual members of District 1 Community Network, you have an automatic way to get those transportation related questions out. So just heads up, and Tracy knows all the good deals or good information.
Well, there we go. So we have plenty of time to come up with some good questions then. I will pause here. Like I said, I'm full of ads and things this evening. If folks are not aware, I feel like this snuck up on me. SDOT, one of the things SDOT did not talk about, they're also working on the Seattle Transportation Plan and making updates. There is this fabulous engagement hub site, I'm kind of jealous, at seattletransportationplan.info. I can't read it here, .infocommunity.org. There's a little screen grab there at the top of the first page. That's all sorts of interactive and seeking feedback. It's translated in 17 languages, which is phenomenal, I think, and not cheap to do, let me tell you. So if you know folks in your in your corner of the neighborhood, or networks that you're a part of that you want to get out to let them know that things are available in, everything from Spanish and Vietnamese and Tagalog to Somali and Amharic to Oromo to things that I don't necessarily recognize immediately. My guess is we've got some Thai there and some Khmer, and I think that's Arabic there. It's an impressive array of languages. But SDOT is excited to announce that 2 Seattle Transportation Plan open houses are being held later this month, which actually is really super close at this point, sorry. These events are an opportunity to view the updated second draft transportation network maps that they've put together, which were updated based on the last round of public input. The open houses are happening in person at Seattle City Hall's Bertha Knight Landis Room. You can see dates and times there. There's a Saturday afternoon availability, as well as a Tuesday evening availability coming up right away here. But you also can go to this amazing engagement hub and walk through the things on your own pace and offer feedback from your very own desk without having to go downtown. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already. I see another chat message here. Oh, and Tracy said, but we're all for other groups having more forums. So I will keep us moving here. Our goals, we're not looking to change, but we'll take a few moments here just to talk about what are our priorities in 2023. I will actually do some interactive stuff here. So thankfully, we can get rid of focusing on capacity here in the corridor. Well, I guess maybe I should leave that there to restore bicycle capacity for the moment, but it does sound like we are finally moving forward and making plans there. But rather than having that there, I would propose that we add, the phrase I went with was West Marginal Way Southwest Safety Corridor Project. We could specifically call out help me, Kate, PBL. What's the P?
Protected bike
Protected,
lanes.
thank you. We could specifically add protected bike lane there to the language if we
Slash.
want, but it is
Yep.
part of the safety corridor project. But it does feel like we might want to specifically call that out unless anybody objects. And then the other idea I had, again, which I mentioned a few moments ago, is I think maybe this is time for us to really press on bus route planning. We know that it's going to be at least 10 years before light rail gets here. So I think waiting to what presumably will be the next big investment in doing a restructure over here is way too long to wait. And part of what I had talked about with some of the folks at the chamber was we're in this constant back and forth where we ask to do things, they say, oh, well, you can't do something now because it needs to take a whole year or more to plan. And we say, great, well, can we get started with that? And they say, oh, well, no, and there's this constant back and forth about either start ahead or wait until it's closer to a service change to make changes. And I think we just need to pressure them to say, no, we really want some planners to come. And I think essentially maybe be willing to do what we did early on with light rail. Be like, we know there's interest in looking at the existing bus routes and whether they're continuing to serve us perfectly, and where we were willing to go out and hold our own forum and start collecting feedback. I think maybe this is a good opportunity where if Metro isn't willing to give us a planner for a couple of hours, or a couple of times over a 2 or 3 month period, that we say, fine, we're just going to start having these conversations without you, and then toss a whole lot of feedback at you. And so you can either help set that up at the front end, or you can wade through it at the back end. But I think it's time to really give them a bit of a push, because I would think there's some real efficiencies that might be out there. I would think that there might be opportunities to do something new. And I think we still have this long-running issue where, you know, folks in Admiral are not thrilled with the bus service. And you know, and changes that, you know, had to happen for various economic reasons, but have never come back. And same thing, you know, folks with the Route 21 and 22, like, if we're going to continue to increase density over here in West Seattle, if we want to continue to, you know, if we want to have a green, you know, more green Seattle future and things like that, then we've got to start getting people to use buses more regularly. And in particular, if everybody's not necessarily focused on commuting downtown every single day like we used to be, yet more opportunity to think, all right, well then how are people getting around within the neighborhood? And how might we, you know, how might we improve that? And I think, I feel like we've always been pretty clear that we're not demanding more budget investment from Metro. We're asking them to, you know, unless we come up with a great idea, we're asking them to potentially reprogram existing bus hours in a way that is better for all of us living here. And I don't see how I think that's a pretty easy thing to sell to the public. But those were my ideas. So let me know if you want to keep one or both of those, or if you've got other ideas to add here.
I think those are both good. Are there any ways that we can get involved with the upcoming levy, and should that be on our list?
Yes, that should be on the ballot in November. Yes, the Move Seattle levy renewal, or is it 2024? Oh, okay,
24. But I don't know how we can have any kind of influence, or I've never been through the process from the.
I thought I just read someplace today about the city looking for people to be on the levy committee.
That's the current oversight committee, I believe. They're looking for,
but that is one place to have an impact potentially.
Yeah, help shepherd the old levy through to its end.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're right. The shaping the new levy.
Yeah, exactly.
Good idea.
Approved by voters in November 2015, 9-year levy. So yeah, it'll be up there in November. So yeah, so presumably, so we may have a little lead time then. My guess is they're going to start a year out, maybe a year and a half out. But we can certainly reach out and ask.
Well, what does that process look like? I mean, do they go to the public looking for ideas, or is it very much like internal SDOT and the council decide?
I mean, I feel the city's tendency is to do lots of internal work, then go out to the public and say, we want your feedback on all of this work that we've already done. I don't know that it's a bad idea, especially with this fabulous new SDOT director, that maybe we want to reach out and say, hey, we really want to be involved as partners early on. Like, what can we do? And what does it look like? If nothing else, just to gather feedback to give them ideas for their initial planning. So I'll leave that with a question mark there right now. We'll reach out to the SDOT folks and be like, how do we get involved? Is that something that happens?
Yeah.
You know, right away here, or do we have to wait until next year? Other ideas? Or is this good? This is potentially 5. All right. wants to take its time saving there. Hearing nothing, I will move us forward then, and that is, oh, that actually literally is the last slide. So, new business. I think I had just the forum idea, right? Yeah. So I have nothing else there for new business. Do folks have new business they want to propose? Hearing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn about 25 minutes early.
I'll move.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right.
Good meeting, Michael.
With that, I will stop
Real
all
good
of our
meeting.
recordings.